Welcome back to Silent Science World, Quiet Wanderer, to another gentle hour on this channel of soft science and slow thoughts. Tonight we are not going to the ocean, or the desert, or the stars above. Tonight we are walking into the woods, not as a backdrop for a story, but as the story itself. A forest is one of the most intricate, most generous, and most quietly powerful systems our planet has ever built. It breathes, it bends light into sugar, it moves water through the sky. It keeps memories in wood and secrets in soil, and beneath every root, inside every trunk, above every leaf, something is always happening, even in the stillest hour of the night. If this kind of slow exploring helps you rest, feel free to leave a like or a small word below before you drift off. It helps this quiet corner of the internet find the people who need it, but you don't have to do anything right now. Just let your hands go loose, let your jaw unclench, let your breathing find its own easy rhythm. There is nowhere else you need to be. Let's step in together, beneath the first line of branches, and begin. Every leaf you have ever passed beneath is a small factory built entirely out of light. Inside its thin green body, sunlight lands on a pigment called chlorophyll, and a slow, ancient chemistry begins. Carbon dioxide drifts in through tiny pores. Water climbs up from distant roots. And in a patient exchange that has been repeating for hundreds of millions of years, these ingredients are rearranged into sugar, food for the plant, and the invisible foundation of nearly every meal any creature on land has ever eaten. Oxygen slips out as the leftover of this process, drifting into the air we share. Trees are not the planet's only source of breathable air. Vast fields of ocean plankton do their share as well, but the contribution of forests is enormous and constant. A quiet gift repeated by billions of leaves every single day. What is easy to forget is that this same process is also building the tree itself. Bark, branch, blossom, fruit, root, all of it is sunlight, slowly turned into matter. Every breath you take tonight carries the faintest trace of that transformation, a small thread connecting your lungs to a forest you may never visit. Some forests do more than simply wait for rain to arrive. In the great equatorial woodlands, trees draw water up from the ground and release it back into the air as vapor, leaf after leaf, day after day, until across a whole horizon, this becomes an enormous river of moisture moving through the sky. In places like the Amazon basin, so much water rises this way that meteorologists describe it as a flowing river above the treetops, an aerial current that can carry humidity far beyond the forest's own edges, feeding rainfall over grasslands, farmland, and cities that may be hundreds of miles away. The forest also releases countless microscopic particles that make it easier for water vapor to gather into droplets and become cloud. When a large stretch of woodland is cut away, the loss is never only local. Less moisture rises, fewer clouds form overhead, and rainfall can weaken in places the forest was never even visible from. A living woodland, it turns out, is not simply scenery, it is part of the machinery that makes weather. Beneath the surface of the forest floor lies a second architecture, one made not of trunks and branches, but of impossibly fine threads of fungus, spreading through the soil in every direction. These threads wind around root tips and travel into spaces roots alone could never reach. Many trees form quiet partnerships with this fungal web. The tree offers sugar, built from captured sunlight, and the fungus offers back water and minerals gathered from far corners of the ground. It is not sentiment. It is a careful exchange, shaped by need and by advantage on both sides. Through these buried threads, resources can sometimes move between separate plants, especially when one is struggling in shade or stress. Researchers are still mapping how much information truly passes through this hidden network, but even the most conservative reading of the evidence tells us something remarkable. A forest is not simply a crowd of individuals standing side by side. It is a community, laced together underground by connections we are only beginning to understand. Step into one of the world's great tropical forests, and the very idea of abundance changes shape. Towering hardwoods rise beside orchids, frogs, beetles, monkeys, fish, birds, and uncountable organisms that still have no name in any scientific record. This richness comes from many forces working together: steady warmth across the seasons, generous and reliable rainfall, rivers that both divide and connect habitats, and layer upon layer of vegetation, each layer offering its own kind of shelter and food. A creature living in the leaf litter may spend its entire life without ever encountering a cousin species living in the canopy far above, even though they share the very same patch of forest. Life here does not simply survive, it specializes endlessly, finding new niches in every crack of shade and light. Some trees standing right now were already old before the first stone monuments of many ancient civilizations were built. High in the dry mountains of western North America, certain long-lived pines endure freezing winds and thin soil for thousands of years, in places where most other plants can barely take hold. Their twisted, weathered trunks are not signs of weakness, they are the visible record of extraordinary endurance. Growing slowly makes their wood dense and resistant to decay, and the harshness of their surroundings keeps pests and competitors away. While kingdoms rose and fell, while languages shifted and cities were built and abandoned, these trees simply stood, adding one narrow ring of growth after another. Each ring holds a memory of its year, thin during hardship, wider during kindness from the weather. To stand beside such a tree is to stand beside a living archive, one that has recorded centuries of cold seasons, dry years, and sunlight from ages long since past. For a long time, this upper realm was one of the least understood habitats on Earth, simply because it was so difficult and dangerous to study closely. It was only once researchers began climbing with ropes, cranes, walkways, and balloons that they discovered a layer with its own rhythms entirely separate from what happens below. Leaves up there catch the strongest sunlight of the day. Flowers open exactly where pollinators are most likely to pass. Birds build nests tucked into forks of high branches. Insects feed, court, and hide among endless folds of green. Some mammals spend nearly their whole lives overhead, moving through branches with the same ease that a fish moves through water, rarely if ever touching solid ground. In many tropical forests, this vertical wilderness may actually hold more species than the soil far beneath it, a road of branches lifted into the light, where every cluster of leaves might be sheltering some small, unseen drama. When an old tree finally falls, its life as shelter has only just begun. Beetles are usually the first to arrive, tunneling into bark and wood. Fungi follow soon after, sending threads deep into the trunk and slowly breaking apart the tough fibers that once held the tree upright. Moss spreads across the damp surface. Salamanders find shelter in the cool hollows beneath. Ants explore old cracks, and snails graze quietly on films of new growth. Over the years, the log softens and gradually merges back into the earth, yet it stays full of activity at every single stage of that long decline. What looks, at first glance, like waste is really a slow and generous feast. The nutrients locked inside the wood are gradually released, returning to the soil where roots can draw them up again for a new generation. Seeds may even sprout directly on the surface of the decaying trunk, using it as a raised, sheltered bed. A fallen tree becomes a bridge between life and death, proof that in a forest an ending is rarely final. It is simply a beginning wearing a different shape. Fire can seem like pure destruction when it moves quickly through dry woodland, and yet many landscapes have grown up alongside flame for countless generations. In some forests, fire clears away thick undergrowth, returns minerals to depleted soil, and opens space where young plants finally have room to grow. Certain seeds are built specifically for this rhythm. Some are sealed inside resin-coated cones that will only soften and release under intense heat, while others actually germinate more successfully once smoke-borne chemicals have touched the soil around them. In this way, a wildfire can act almost like an alarm clock, waking an entire generation of plants that has been quietly waiting, sometimes for years. Of course, fires that come too often or burn too fiercely can overwhelm even these adaptations. But under natural historical patterns, heat has long been part of renewal rather than pure ruin. The canopy opens, the ash settles, and hidden life begins to rise again from beneath it. Stretching across the far northern reaches of the planet lies an enormous belt of spruce, pine, fir, and moss known as the Boreal forest, and much of its real power lies hidden underground. In these cold latitudes, decay slows dramatically, so dead plant material does not break down quickly the way it would in a warmer climate. Instead, it accumulates, year after year, in soils, wetlands, and peat, where carbon can remain locked safely away for centuries, sometimes far longer. Where permafrost is present, the frozen ground acts almost like a natural vault, preserving ancient organic matter for an extraordinary length of time. This makes the Boreal region one of the planet's most significant carbon reservoirs, its soils arguably mattering even more than its trees. When warming, drainage, or severe fire disturbs these stores, ancient carbon can be released back into the atmosphere after being held in place for a very long time. From a distance, this landscape can look sparse compared to a lush rainforest. But underneath the moss lies a hidden archive of climate history, built slowly from needles, roots, and season after season of unhurried decay. Birds call to defend their territory, to attract a mate, or to warn of danger nearby. Insects vibrate stems, drum against wood, or release scents that guide others toward food. Mammals mark trails with scent and stay alert to every subtle shift in movement around them. Even plants take part in this exchange, though their language is chemical rather than spoken. When leaves are damaged, some species release airborne compounds that can prepare nearby plants to strengthen their own defenses in advance. Roots respond constantly to moisture, minerals, gravity, and the growth of their neighbors. Even the simple creak of a trunk in the wind carries information to the animals listening nearby. None of this communication requires words. It can be scent, color, motion, pressure, timing, or even faint electrical signals. To us, a forest might sound like birdsong and the rustle of leaves. To everything living inside it, that same sound is a constant flow of warnings, invitations, and quiet instructions. There is something quietly moving in how plant roots seem able to recognize their own close relatives growing nearby. In several studies, young seedlings have grown differently when surrounded by kin compared to unrelated neighbors, competing less aggressively for space and resources when family is close by. This recognition appears to rely on chemical signals released into the soil, sensed by the fine, constantly exploring tips of the roots. It reframes how we might picture a stand of young seedlings, not simply a crowd of identical sprouts racing blindly for nutrients, but a group shaped by subtler, evolved choices happening quietly below the surface, where every scrap of light and every trace of mineral can matter enormously. When insects begin attacking a leaf, that leaf is far from helpless. As it is chewed, the damaged tissue can release airborne chemicals into the surrounding air, and nearby plants may detect these compounds and begin preparing their own defenses before the insects even reach them, toughening their leaves, producing bitter compounds, or altering their chemistry to become less appealing. Some plants go a step further, releasing scents that attract the natural predators of the very insects attacking them, turning the surrounding ecosystem into an improvised defense network. None of this means plants are thinking or planning the way animals do. It means that evolution has shaped a chemical response that functions like an early warning system, where a single damaged branch can quietly change the behavior of leaves it has never even touched. In certain warm regions, one tree species has built one of nature's most enduring partnerships with a colony of small, fiercely loyal ants. The tree offers the ants shelter inside hollow thorns and feeds them sugary nectar from special glands, and in return, the ants patrol every branch with remarkable dedication. When a browsing animal, a climbing vine, or a hungry insect touches the tree, the ants rush out and attack, biting and swarming with such intensity that many would-be herbivores learn to avoid the plant entirely. Some colonies even trim back competing vegetation nearby, keeping their host tree bathed in better light. It is a striking example of how defense can be outsourced. Instead of relying solely on thorns or toxins, the tree effectively maintains a standing army, and the two very different forms of life become stronger for having found one another. In the rainforests of Central and Western Africa, elephants are not simply large animals passing through the trees. They are, in every practical sense, ecological engineers. As they move, they push through dense growth, opening paths used later by countless smaller creatures. They feed on fruit, bark, leaves, and branches, tearing gaps in the canopy where sunlight can finally reach the forest floor. Their droppings carry seeds far from the parent tree, wrapped conveniently in natural fertilizer. Some large-seeded plants depend almost entirely on these long journeys, since smaller animals simply cannot swallow or transport such heavy seeds. Over time, the paths elephants choose to walk can shape which tree species spread and where new growth eventually takes root, meaning their disappearance from a forest is never a small loss. It can quietly reshape the future structure of an entire woodland. A woodpecker can strike its beak against bark thousands of times in a single day without suffering the kind of injury a similar blow would cause almost any other creature. Its skull is shaped to distribute the force of each impact. Specialized bone structure in the beak absorbs shock before it can travel further. Strong neck muscles keep every strike moving in a straight line, minimizing dangerous twisting, and even its long, coiled tongue helps cushion and support the skull from within. What looks like frantic, reckless tapping is, in fact, a remarkable piece of biological engineering. Woodpeckers drum to search for food, to carve out nesting cavities, and to communicate across long distances through the trees, and the holes they leave behind often become homes later for owls, bats, squirrels, and other creatures entirely unable to build such shelters themselves. One bird's daily labor becomes a doorway for countless other lives. Owls hunt in almost complete silence because their feathers are shaped to soften the turbulence most birds create in flight. The leading edge of an owl's wing carries small comb-like fringes that break incoming air into gentler, smaller currents, while the trailing edge stays soft, easing the air smoothly away as it leaves the wing. A velvety texture across the feather surface absorbs even more sound. Together, these adaptations make an owl's wing beat nearly impossible for many prey animals to detect, which matters enormously, since owls often hunt creatures with extraordinarily sharp hearing, like mice and voles. That silence allows the hunter to approach without warning, and it also helps the owl listen carefully to its surroundings even while airborne. In a dark forest where sight offers little advantage, this quiet, feathered stealth becomes one of the most refined hunting tools nature has ever produced. Beneath the floor of many tropical forests, colonies of leaf-cutting ants tend vast underground gardens with astonishing precision. Each worker slices pieces from leaves and hauls them back to the nest not to eat directly, but to feed a cultivated fungus that the entire colony depends on. Deep in their underground chambers, the ants clean, prune, and carefully tend these fungal gardens, removing contaminants and adding fresh material at just the right moments. In return, the fungus breaks down the plant matter and produces nutritious growths the ants can eat. This form of underground agriculture existed millions of years before humans ever planted their first crop. Some colonies contain millions of individuals, divided into castes with distinct roles. Tiny workers tend the gardens, larger workers cut the leaves, and soldiers guard the trails. Beneath the forest floor, an entire living farm operates quietly, powered by cooperation, leaves, and one of the oldest partnerships in the natural world. Termites are often unfairly remembered only as destroyers of wood, but within a forest, they serve as essential recyclers. Many species feed on dead plant material that few other animals could digest, aided by microbes living in their gut that break down tough plant fibers and release the nutrients trapped inside. As they tunnel and build, termites mix and aerate the soil and help move minerals through the ground. Some construct mounds capable of regulating their own internal temperature and moisture with striking efficiency, while others live quietly out of sight inside fallen logs or underground tunnels. In tropical forests especially, their activity becomes crucial during dry stretches, when their tunnels help rain soak into the earth and their steady feeding keeps decomposition moving forward. Their work happens almost entirely in darkness and goes largely unnoticed. Yet without these small, tireless recyclers, forests would carry far more waste and receive far fewer nutrients back in return. A sloth's fur is not simply hair, it is a small, living habitat of its own. Each individual strand carries tiny grooves and cracks that hold moisture, allowing algae to take root and spread slowly across the animal's body. This faint greenish tint helps the sloth blend into the surrounding canopy, where leaves, moss, and shifting shadow already break up any clear outline. Sloths move so slowly that camouflage becomes one of their greatest defenses. Rather than fleeing quickly from danger, they simply avoid being noticed in the first place. Their unhurried metabolism, low-energy diet, and careful, deliberate movements all support this quiet strategy. Hanging upside down among the branches, a sloth can look less like an animal and more like a simple extension of the tree itself. What might appear lazy from the outside is, in truth, a finely specialized form of survival built entirely around patience. Under ordinary daylight, A flying squirrel appears simply as a soft, nocturnal glider slipping silently between trees. But under ultraviolet light, its fur can glow in surprising shades of pink, a fluorescence completely invisible to the naked eye under normal conditions. Researchers are still investigating why this trait exists at all. It may play some role in communication, in camouflage during twilight hours, or in helping individuals recognize their own species. It might simply be an incidental quirk of fur chemistry, without any deeper function. Whatever the true explanation turns out to be, the discovery reshaped how people picture these quiet, nighttime gliders. It is a gentle reminder that forests hold entire dimensions our own senses were never built to notice, that to an owl, an insect, or another squirrel, the night may not resemble true darkness at all, but a space filled with signals we are only beginning to glimpse. Water does not only gather in streams and rivers within a tropical forest, it can also collect high above the ground, held in the small cupped leaves of certain plants, tucked into tree hollows, or pooled inside tight clusters of foliage. For some frogs, these tiny reservoirs become nurseries. A parent may lay her eggs on a single leaf, then carry the newly hatched tadpoles, one by one, on her own back to a pool no larger than a teacup. Some species return again and again, feeding their young with unfertilized eggs in a repeated, careful act of parenting. It is an extraordinary solution to a genuinely dangerous problem. A large pond might hold plenty of food, but it also holds predators, while a hidden pool in the canopy is safer, though it dries quickly and offers very little nourishment. So the frog trades one danger for another, building a tiny family life in miniature, where survival depends entirely on remembering exactly where each small, temporary nursery waits. Look down at any forest floor and you are looking at one of nature's great recycling systems in constant motion. Leaves fall, flowers wither, branches snap, and scraps of food are left behind by passing animals, and none of it simply disappears. It enters a slow, crowded world of beetles, worms, tiny insects, fungi, and bacteria, all working together to break large remains into smaller pieces, and eventually into compounds that plants can use again. This hidden labor quietly feeds the next generation of roots, shoots, and blossoms. Without this constant decay, a forest would eventually choke on its own fallen material, its nutrients locked uselessly inside dead matter. Instead, the ground becomes a place of ongoing transformation. A fallen leaf may slowly become part of a mushroom, then soil, then eventually a new tree. It is not a gloomy process at all. It is the quiet engine room of renewal, where every ending is gently taken apart and folded back into the beginning of something new. A single spoonful of forest soil can hold more living organisms than there are people in many entire nations. Bacteria, tiny fungi, microscopic protists, and countless other forms of life crowd into every pinch of earth, most too small to ever be seen directly, yet their collective influence is enormous. Some break down dead material. Some help plant roots access nutrients they could never reach alone. Others produce chemicals that shape plant growth or compete against harmful organisms nearby. They live inside thin films of moisture surrounding grains of soil, in the busy zone just around each root, and in every pocket of organic matter scattered through the ground. Every step through a forest, then, crosses an invisible metropolis, one with its own neighborhoods, its own food chains, its own quiet battles for space. A forest's grandeur is easy enough to see in its trunks and its canopy, but much of its true intelligence is microscopic, working tirelessly just beneath the surface most of us will ever walk across. One of the forest's most essential deals happens entirely out of sight, underground. Trees make sugar using captured sunlight, yet they often struggle to reach certain nutrients locked deep in the soil. Fungi have the opposite advantage. Their fine threads can slip into spaces roots could never enter, drawing minerals from the ground far more efficiently than roots alone ever could, so the two partners simply trade what each has in surplus. The tree offers carbon-rich sugar. The fungus delivers phosphorus, nitrogen, water, and trace minerals gathered from the surrounding earth. This is not generosity for its own sake. It is a living marketplace shaped by need scarcity and constant negotiation. Some fungi receive more sugar, the more nutrients they provide. Some trees favor whichever fungal partner serves them best. Around every root tip, the soil becomes a small zone of chemistry and trade, where invisible exchanges quietly shape the health of the entire tree above. Orchid seeds are almost impossibly small. Many are little more than dust, light enough to drift on the faintest breeze, but carrying almost no stored food of their own. That makes the very beginning of life difficult. A seed may land in a perfect patch of forest and still be unable to grow unless the right fungus happens to be present in the soil beneath it. Once it enters the seed, that fungal partner supplies the nutrients needed to wake the tiny plant and allow it to begin forming its first roots and leaves. Some orchids remain dependent on their fungal partner for a very long time, especially those living deep in shaded understory, while others eventually build enough of their own food through photosynthesis to grow more independently. This relationship makes orchids both delicate and quietly astonishing. Before the flower, before the color and shape people so often admire, there is a hidden dependency, a quiet beginning made possible entirely by fungal life working unseen in the dark soil. The tallest trees on Earth accomplish something close to an engineering marvel every single day, without pumps, without engines, without a single moving part. Water enters through the roots and rises through narrow tubes of wood, called xylem, pulled upward mainly because leaves are constantly losing water vapor into the air. As each tiny molecule escapes, it tugs gently on the molecules behind it, creating a continuous, unbroken chain stretching from root to crown. This simple tension can lift water to truly astonishing heights, in the very tallest trees, farther than the height of many buildings. Gravity resists every inch of that climb. Air bubbles threaten to break the chain. Drought can strain the whole delicate system, and yet the tree keeps lifting water skyward, day after day, to leaves that depend on it for photosynthesis. A living tower stands quietly in the forest, raising moisture from the ground to the sky, using nothing more than structure, sunlight, and the simple physics of attraction. Along parts of the Pacific coast, summers can be dry at ground level, even while thick fog rolls steadily in from the ocean. For the towering redwoods that grow there, this mist is more than mere atmosphere, it is a genuine lifeline. Their needles and fine branches can capture moisture directly from passing fog, absorbing some of it while letting the rest drip gently down to water the soil below. This helps the trees endure the driest months of the year, and it waters the smaller plants growing around them as well. Fog also cools the surrounding air and raises humidity, easing stress on the whole canopy above. In a real sense, these forests are tuned to the rhythm of the sea. Their tallest trunks stand exactly where ocean air reaches furthest inland, and their crowns quietly comb moisture straight out of passing clouds. A redwood grove can feel ancient and utterly still from below, even while high above, it is steadily harvesting water from the open air. Where land meets tropical coastline, certain trees grow in conditions that would kill most other plants outright. Salt water floods their roots. The surrounding mud holds almost no oxygen. Tides rise and fall twice a day. And yet these coastal forests turn every one of these harsh conditions into a form of protection. Their tangled roots form underwater corridors where young fish can hide safely from larger predators, while crabs, shrimp, and small invertebrates gather in the shelter these roots provide, creating rich feeding grounds close to shore. For many reef and coastal species, this maze of roots functions almost like a nursery before they ever venture into open water. These forests also trap sediment, soften incoming waves, and help stabilize shorelines during storms, while their fallen leaves feed food webs that extend well beyond the forest's own edge. What might look, from a distance, like nothing more than a muddy thicket is, in truth, a coastal life support system, quietly nurturing the next generation of fish where forest meets sea. High on certain tropical mountains, some forests live almost permanently wrapped in drifting cloud. As air rises and cools, moisture condenses into a fog that drifts through the branches like a living veil. Trees, moss, ferns, and other plants growing there capture droplets directly on their surfaces, and water gathers, runs along leaves, and reaches the ground even on days when no rain has actually fallen. This makes the forest itself function almost like a net stretched across the sky. Many of these plants are thickly covered in moss simply because the air stays so consistently damp, and the canopy can seem almost heavy with suspended water. These habitats tend to be small, isolated, and unusually rich in species that live nowhere else on the planet. A particular frog, orchid, or salamander might exist on one single mountain range and nowhere beyond it. Their entire world shaped by altitude, temperature, and mist arriving at precisely the right height. Hundreds of millions of years ago, strange swampy forests spread across large parts of the ancient earth, filled with giant club mosses, towering horsetails, and early trees unlike almost anything alive today. When this vegetation died, much of it fell into waterlogged ground, where decay moved very slowly. Oxygen was limited, and plant matter gradually built up in thick layers of peat. Across an almost unimaginable stretch of time, burial, pressure, and heat slowly transformed that material into coal. These dark seams are not simply rock, they are the compressed remains of vanished forests, carbon originally captured from ancient air through photosynthesis, later sealed underground by shifting geology. When that coal is finally burned today, it releases energy from sunlight that once fell on ecosystems older than the dinosaurs themselves. A single lump of coal is in its own quiet way a dark fossil of long-lost green abundance. In cold and strongly seasonal forests, survival can genuinely depend on memory. Certain birds gather seeds or insects and store them across dozens, sometimes thousands, of scattered locations, returning to these hidden caches later with astonishing accuracy once food becomes scarce. Some can recall thousands of individual hiding places across a landscape that, to human eyes, would look almost entirely uniform. They rely on landmarks, spatial patterns, and a highly active region of the brain devoted to memory and navigation. This ability is not a small trick. It can genuinely decide whether a bird survives the winter. A single seed tucked into bark or soil may become a vital meal weeks or even months later. What might look like random hopping from branch to branch may, in truth, be a precise journey through a remembered map that exists nowhere but inside that bird's own mind. Each autumn, certain birds gather acorns and hide them across the forest floor, pressing them into soil, leaf litter, and mossy cracks, often choosing spots where the seed has a genuine chance of remaining undisturbed. The bird fully intends to return and eat many of these hidden stores later, but no memory is perfect, and some acorns are simply never recovered. Those forgotten caches can sprout into new seedlings. In this quiet way, a bird searching only for its own winter meals becomes an accidental gardener, scattering the beginnings of future oaks across the landscape. Heavy acorns rarely travel far on wind alone, so oaks depend heavily on animals willing to carry them well away from the shade and competition of the parent tree, and a future oak, more often than we might imagine, begins its life as nothing more than a small, honest mistake in a bird's memory. In certain years, many trees of the same species will suddenly produce enormous crops of seeds or nuts all at once, an event known as masting, and it can completely transform the rhythm of a forest for that season. Deer, bears, birds, squirrels, and countless insects may all benefit from this sudden overflow of food. But the strategy also serves the trees themselves. In leaner years, seed-eating animals stay fewer in number, and then, when a mast year finally arrives, there are simply too many seeds for every hungry mouth to consume. Enough survive untouched to germinate and grow. Scientists still do not fully understand the precise timing behind these events. Weather, stored energy, and internal chemical signals likely all play some part. The effect can feel almost like a pulse moving through the woodland. One season the ground looks entirely ordinary, and the next it becomes an unexpected banquet, briefly reshaping the lives of every creature nearby. A squirrel bearing a single nut might look like a small, unremarkable moment, but it is part of a much larger and more consequential process. Many squirrels scatter their stores across dozens of separate hiding spots, rather than keeping one central pile, digging, burying, covering, and moving steadily on to build a hidden pantry spread across their entire territory. Some of these buried seeds are eaten later. Others are stolen by rivals. A portion is simply forgotten or abandoned, and those may go on to germinate. This gives heavy seeds a way to travel beyond the shadow of their parent tree that they could never manage alone. The squirrel's own preferences matter here too. It may favor certain seed sizes, avoid damaged nuts, or bury food in places that happen to suit a young plant perfectly. In this quiet way, animal instinct ends up shaping the future pattern of an entire woodland, one small, half-remembered decision at a time. When berries ripen, bears become remarkably efficient engines of seed dispersal. They can eat enormous quantities of fruit in a single day, swallowing seeds along with the pulp, and those seeds later pass through the digestive system and emerge far from the parent plant, usually wrapped in a rich deposit of natural fertilizer. Because bears travel widely, crossing slopes, streams, and forest edges in a single season, they can move seeds across distances no plant could ever manage on its own. This matters especially in mountain landscapes, where suitable habitat can be scattered unevenly across the terrain. A single berry bush may find its next generation carried steadily uphill, along a valley, or into a bright new clearing, where sunlight is far stronger than anything near its parent. The bear is not trying to plant anything at all, it is simply feeding. And yet its appetite quietly links animal movement to the future spread of the forest itself. A predator does not need to eat every single prey animal in order to reshape an entire landscape. Its mere presence can change where prey animals choose to go, how long they linger while feeding, and which places they instinctively avoid. Where wolves move regularly through a region, deer and elk may spend noticeably less time grazing in exposed clearings or along certain stream banks, giving young trees and shrubs a genuine chance to take root and grow taller before being browsed away. In some ecosystems, shifts in grazing pressure like this have been linked to the gradual recovery of willows, aspens, and other vegetation nearby. The full picture is always more complicated, shaped also by weather, human activity, and the presence of other animals. Still, the underlying idea remains striking. Fear itself can carry real ecological consequences. A wolf moving quietly through the snow may influence the fate of a sapling it never actually touches. A sapling that years later might shelter birds, shade a stream, and hold soil firmly in place. A beaver does far more than simply gnaw down trees. It reshapes water itself, building dams from branches, mud, and stone that slow streams and gradually form entirely new ponds. Water spreads outward into the surrounding ground, raising the local water table and creating fresh wetland habitat. Dead trees may stand in the newly flooded area, while new plants slowly colonize the edges. Frogs breed in the shallows. Ducks nest close by. Insects multiply rapidly. Fish find slower, calmer water and shelter, and mammals come regularly to drink and feed. During dry periods, beaver ponds can hold on to moisture in the landscape, even when everywhere else has grown parched, while also trapping sediment and adding real complexity to the surrounding habitat. What begins as a simple lodge and dam for one small family can grow into an entire wetland-woodland system. The beaver working like an engineer armed with nothing more than teeth, instinct, and remarkable persistence. Many great rivers do not begin dramatically at all. They begin as seepage, as scattered droplets, as hidden trickles of water emerging quietly from shaded forest ground. Rain soaks into soil, moves slowly between roots, and gathers in small hollows, while moss and fallen leaves slow its progress, giving it time to filter gently downward. Springs appear wherever this underground flow finally meets the surface. At first, the resulting channel may be narrow enough to simply step across, and yet it already carries the beginning of something much larger. These small headwaters matter enormously. Their cool, steady temperatures shelter insects, salamanders, and young fish. Fallen leaves feed the aquatic food web below, and roots along the banks hold soil firmly in place, reducing erosion. Because they are so small, these trickling headwaters are often overlooked or damaged, and yet they quietly shape the quality of water all the way downstream. A great, wide river may owe much of its clarity and rhythm to countless tiny forest streams gradually joining together, their long journey to the sea beginning in a single quiet patch of moss. A lichen is not truly a single organism in the ordinary sense. It is a partnership, usually between a fungus and a photosynthetic partner such as an alga. Together they can survive in places where almost nothing else can take hold, clinging to bare bark, exposed rock, old fences, and even frozen mountain ridges. The photosynthetic partner makes food from sunlight, while the fungus provides structure, protection, and a way to hold on to precious moisture. Some lichens can dry out almost completely and later revive the moment water returns. Others grow so slowly that a single small patch may persist, essentially unchanged, for decades. On bare stone, they can even help begin the earliest stages of soil formation, trapping dust and slowly releasing acids that wear down minerals. In a forest, they provide nesting material, camouflage, food for certain animals, and useful clues about air quality. A lichen might look, at first glance, like nothing more than a stain on bark, and yet it is a tiny cooperative world, quietly surviving on nothing but light, air, and patience. In certain damp, quiet woods, decaying logs and mushrooms can glow with a faint greenish light after dark, a natural phenomenon called bioluminescence, produced by chemical reactions inside living fungal tissue. This soft glow may help attract insects that go on to spread fungal spores, though researchers are still studying its exact purpose across different species. The effect can feel almost unreal. A rotting branch becomes gently luminous, a mushroom cap seems to hold a hidden ember of light. The glow is usually faint, easiest to notice once you step away from any artificial light nearby. What makes this especially fascinating is the contrast at its heart. These fungi are quietly breaking down dead wood, even while producing a visible glow in the process. Decay, in this small corner of the forest, becomes gently illuminated. A forest at night may look entirely dark from a distance, but in the right patch of damp ground, life is quietly making its own soft light. On warm evenings, tiny flashes appear scattered between grasses, shrubs, and low branches, each one produced by a small beetle using chemistry with extraordinary efficiency. Inside special organs, oxygen reacts with light-producing molecules and enzymes, creating a glow that carries almost no heat at all. Different firefly species flash in distinct patterns, and these rhythms help males and females find the right partner in the dark. Some signal from resting leaves, while others drift through the air, flashing steadily as they fly. In certain places, entire groups can synchronize their flashing, turning a woodland edge into a field of gently pulsing light. But this beauty carries its own risk. Some predatory fireflies mimic the flash patterns of other species entirely, luring hopeful, unsuspecting males close enough to be caught. Every small light in the dark, then, can be an invitation, an identification, or a trap. A reminder that communication in a forest is never limited only to sound and scent. Every year, many trees growing in seasonal climates add a fresh ring of new wood, and the width and character of that ring quietly reflects the conditions it grew through. A wet, favorable year may leave behind a wide band. A drought may leave only a narrow one. Fire can leave a visible scar along the trunk. Cooler temperatures following a major volcanic eruption somewhere on Earth may even appear as a subtle shift in the pattern. Scientists study these growth rings through a careful science called dendrochronology, comparing samples taken from living trees, old dead wood, wooden beams, and other preserved remains, matching patterns to build timelines stretching back thousands of years. In this quiet way, a tree becomes a natural archive, storing environmental history without a single written word. This is not memory in the way humans experience it, but it is evidence carefully written into living tissue, a trunk holding the record of storms, hardship, recovery, and shifting climate, one growing season passing through it at a time. For countless generations, indigenous peoples have lived alongside forests through careful observation, daily practice, and a deep sense of responsibility toward the land. Their accumulated knowledge often includes exactly where certain useful plants grow, when particular animals move through the seasons, which trees offer medicine or food, and how fire can be used carefully to renew a landscape rather than destroy it. In many regions, controlled cultural burning has reduced dangerous fuel buildup, encouraged the growth of useful plants, supported wildlife habitat, and helped maintain an open, healthier forest structure. This understanding did not arise separately from science. It comes from sustained, careful attention to a single place, tested across countless seasons and carried forward through story, ceremony, and everyday work. Many researchers now increasingly recognize that forests once assumed to be entirely untouched by people were, in fact, shaped by generations of skilled human care. Conservation, understood this way, is not always simply about keeping people out. Sometimes it means remembering how people once lived within a forest wisely, and asking what that older knowledge might still teach us about protecting it now. Plants cannot run from the creatures that would eat them, so many have turned instead to chemistry as their defense. Leaves, bark, roots, seeds, and flowers can all contain compounds meant to deter insects, slow the spread of fungi, or discourage grazing animals altogether. Over long stretches of human history, traditional healers, local communities, and eventually laboratory scientists all found substances within these plants that could influence pain, fever, infection, and other conditions. Not every natural compound is safe. Many, in fact, are genuinely dangerous. But some became the careful foundation for major medical treatments after long study and refinement. This makes a forest not only a habitat, but a living chemical library. Every single species may hold molecules shaped by millions of years of quiet survival, many of them never tested, some never even named. When a forest disappears, that unknown chemistry disappears along with it. A small, unremarkable plant growing in constant shade may hold a compound that could one day matter enormously to human medicine, if only it is allowed to remain long enough for someone to understand it. Even the ordinary scent of a forest carries meaning far beyond what our own noses ever fully register. That fresh green smell released after leaves are crushed or torn is very often a signal of injury, a burst of volatile compounds meant to help seal wounds, deter attackers, or quietly alert nearby parts of the same plant. Some of these compounds can even attract the natural predators of whatever insect caused the damage in the first place. To us, the scent might feel pleasant, clean, even nostalgic. To the countless organisms living inside that forest, it can mean danger, food, injury, or sudden opportunity. A woodland smell is never really one single fragrance. It is a constantly shifting mixture of signals rising from leaves, bark, soil, flowers, and fungi, changed moment to moment by heat, rain, and the simple passage of time. And after a long dry spell, the very first drops of rain can release a scent so distinctive that many people recognize it instantly, without ever needing to be told what it is. Part of that fragrance comes from a compound produced by certain soil bacteria, which can slowly accumulate in dry ground over time. When raindrops finally strike the parched soil, they trap tiny air bubbles that burst upward, carrying microscopic particles and aromatic molecules directly into the air above. In a forest, this rich, earthy scent can rise from footpaths, fallen leaves, exposed roots, and shaded soil all at once. It is not simply water meeting dust. It is chemistry lifted suddenly by impact, a clear signal that conditions around the forest have finally changed. For humans, it can feel almost like relief, as though the ground itself is quietly breathing again after a long, dry silence. A forest, in the end, is never really finished. It is always becoming itself again. Sunlight feeding leaves, leaves building sugar, roots searching patiently through soil, and fungi, microbes, and countless small animals moving nutrients endlessly between the living and the dead. Storms open sudden spaces in the canopy. Seeds wait for years, then travel, sprout, or quietly fail. Some trees rise quickly and are gone again within a few short decades. Others stand for centuries, slowly gathering an entire history inside their wood. No single part of this system explains the whole of it. A forest is process rather than object, growth and decay happening together, competition and quiet cooperation woven into the very same root systems, water climbing patiently through trunks, minerals returning gently from fallen bodies, and life adjusting again and again to whatever change arrives next. To walk beneath its branches, even for a few quiet minutes, is to step into a system far older than any single path worn through it. And so, gently, we arrive at the edge of tonight's path through the trees. We climbed with water as it rose invisibly through ancient trunks, drifted into distant clouds, and returned softly as rain. We listened as best we could for the hidden conversations moving through the soil, where roots and fungi quietly trade what each other needs in complete darkness. We met careful farmers no larger than a fingertip, birds that plant forests by simply forgetting, owls that move through branches without a sound, and small seeds that spin, float, and travel steadily toward some new and distant beginning. A forest we've seen tonight is never merely scenery passing by a window. It is shelter. It is memory held quietly in wood. It is chemistry drifting on evening air, and weather made slowly from a billion working leaves. It is the hush beneath a heavy canopy, the soft glow of old fungus on a fallen branch, the scent of rain finally waking dry and thirsty soil, and the slow, patient return of life after fire, after storm, after the longest winter. Every fallen trunk becomes, quietly, a nursery. Every hollow in an old tree becomes someone's home. Every leaf, every root, every small footprint in the moss belongs to something far larger than itself. Let all of that settle now, softly, around you. There is nothing left to follow tonight. Let the forest grow still and quiet in your mind. Picture the last thin light fading gently between the trunks. Feel the air cooling. Imagine the moss beneath you, soft and yielding. Somewhere far off, water is still moving quietly over smooth stone, and somewhere above you, branches shift just slightly as the night settles all the way down into the leaves. If this quiet walk helped ease you toward rest, you're always welcome to leave a small thought below, so this gentle little corner of the internet can keep finding the people who need it most. And if you happen to still be awake, there will be another quiet path waiting for you, whenever you're ready to wander again. But for tonight, let your shoulders soften completely. Let your breathing slow all the way down. Please like and share Silent Science World. Let this whole green world fade gently into a soft, wordless dream. Rest well, quiet wanderer. Sleep well, and good night.